he is a top play this week against a team giving up the 5th most fantasy points allowed to the position. It's a bad matchup for Andre Williams, besides the fact that he's been struggling. The Seahawks, 83 yards per game allowed, 3 rushing TDs. That's bad. The Seahawks, you start their defense this week because Eli can implode it anytime. And if you're looking for a deep sleeper, Luke Wilson at tight end, but he's really, really deep. I mean, if he does something, I would be stunned, but the matchup is right. Seahawks win, Keith. Seahawks win.
All right. The Chicago Bears, travel to the Green Bay Packers. I just actually finished writing my game preview for this for the fantasygreek.com. And I will tell you the last sentence of my introductory paragraph. We've seen this play before, and the ending stinks. If you're a Bears fan, this team is what it is right now. And until they show us something different, the last time we saw them 2 weeks ago, they were getting shellacked by the New England Patriots, 51-23, including a 31-point second quarter. 31 points. A fantasy standpoint, Cutler finished with a good day, 20 of 30 for just 227, but 3 touchdowns. He did have a couple turnovers, but most of that time came in garbage time, which helps fantasy owners. What I did like about the Bears' offense in that game was Martellus Bennett was angry. He played like he had a chip on his shoulder. Every time he caught the ball in the second half, he was trying to carry defenders on his back. I appreciate that. The problem with the Bears is their defense. Rob Gronkowski went off for 9 catches for 149 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he didn't even play most of the second half. Tom Brady, 30 of 35 for 354 and 5 touchdowns. You have to play some kind of defense. The Bears either don't have the personnel, or they don't have the coaching, or they don't have either. Green Bay, on the other hand, Aaron Rodgers went over, under, around, through the Bears last time they played. It was a debacle. 38-17 was the final score, but the game was not that close. Jay Cutler did some nice things again in that game, but he also did some things that just make you want to just drink heavily. The last time we saw the Packers, they were losing to the Saints big in the Dome, 44-23. This is a game where Green Bay's at home. They're favored by a touchdown right now. Lamar Houston, a big free agent signing, tore his ACL, celebrating a sack in garbage time, so he's on injured reserve. But the only good thing about that is that it paves the way for Willie Young, who has been their best defensive lineman all season, to be in the starting lineup. The problem is it won't make a difference. Green Bay wins this one, and I bet you they win by at least 14.
Wow. That was really good, Keith. I don't have much to add to any of that. I will say I think this will be a high-scoring game. Everything sets up right for it. Certainly, Aaron Rodgers should have one of his best games along with his wide receivers, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and I'm even going to throw Devontae Adams in there as a wide receiver 3. Bears have given up 17. That is the third most, 17 pass TDs so far this season, third most in the league. And if you're the Bears, the way you're going to win this game is you need to get a big game out of Matt Forte. I mean, huge. The Packers are giving up 153.5 yards per game, worst in the NFL, and 9 TDs to date. You get Forte for all those yards, plus get him involved in the passing game. Keep that Packers offense off the field, and there's a good chance you might just win. But if you can't do that, you're not going to win this game. I'm going to have to take the Packers, but this is the Bears-Packers. I mean, it's Bears-Packers week. Lots of things can happen, lots of weird things, and I wouldn't put it past the Bears to get us all mad and then suddenly shockingly win this one, but come on, who's kidding who? Packers win. Go Packers.
No, you can't say go Packers. We're Bears fans. You can't say go Packers. You can pick them because...
No, but I'm imitating how it would be said. Up north.
Have you ever listened
to
the
Packers?
Not.
Have
you ever met a Packers fan? I doubt there would be that much more intelligible language. Anyway, there. I said it.
Oh, jeez.
I said it. I did say it.
It's okay. There are some that have not said many nice things about Bears fans. But, we like our Packers fans, too. We have a great writer for the Packers on our site, by the way.
Part of the vitriol, by the way. That's what makes the rivalry a rivalry.
It does. No, you're right about that.
Just saying.
But, for Packers fans, the bigger rivalry is the Packers-Vikings.
Which I don't... Because the Bears have been bad for most of the later part of the 20th century. I mean, the Bears' glory years were all in the 40s. I mean,
I just think they might have more things in common or see more things eye to eye than their football.
Yeah, it's just like Bears Packers. If reading about the history of the league in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, there was a bona fide hatred there. Green Bay fans would march around visiting the Bears hotel, banging on garbage can lids until 6 a.m. so that they couldn't sleep. I mean, it was all. I mean, that's old school stuff. That's where it really started. Then the Bears.
That's what I would call Bush League.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the Green Bay Packers. What do you expect? And then you had the Lombardi years where the Green Bay owned the NFL, and the Bears were bad except for the '63 team, and the Bears were bad all through the '70s and it's the beginning of the '80s, and then Ditka and company brought them back, and then they were bad for most of the '90s and all of the '90s really. But,
yeah, the Bears have been generally pretty bad. Yeah. But let's see what they can do coming out of this bye week, Keith. Let's see.
Yeah. Ever the optimist you are. Ever the optimist.
Who knows? No, I mean, you got to favor the Packers in this one, but, I mean, it is true. If Jay Cutler gets his act together, doesn't commit all the ridiculous plays that we know he can commit, something can happen. But problem is the defense.
Right.
And I've been thinking about what you've said in the past about the defensive coordinator for the Bears, that he should genuinely be on the hot seat. I mean, you look at these numbers, and it's his problem. If you want to help Jay Cutler, get a good defense on the field.
Yeah, and people can make the argument whether or not they have the personnel or not, but there are teams getting more out of less talent than what the Bears have on that roster.
That would be true. That would be true.
Just saying. Okay. So The last game of the week, the Carolina Panthers travel to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Mark Sanchez Eagles this year, or this game, as Nick Foles is out with a broken collarbone. Oh, I was tempted in this game to pick Carolina. I was. And don't ask me why. What jumps out to me is that the Eagles are -10 in takeaway differential. The Panthers are +4. They don't really turn the ball over all that much. But then you go and you look at the Panthers' defense. They give up 246 yards through the air game, 131 on the ground. And if Mark Sanchez is going to be under center, I would imagine Chip Kelly will run the ball or have a heavy emphasis on running the ball and trying to keep Sanchez from having to throw the ball. Last week, though, Sanchez didn't do all that bad. He did have some god-awful plays, but he did finish throwing for 202 yards on 22 attempts and 2 touchdowns. The Eagles are at home. They are 4-0 at home this year. I think it's too much to ask Carolina to go in there and beat them, even with Sanchez. I don't want to, but I'm going to pick the Philadelphia Sanchez's.
And for me, the problem is the Panthers, they're scoring. They're 7th in the league, in 7th worst. They're averaging not even 20 points per game. And then on defense, you're just flipping it around, and they're the 7th worst there too, allowing just over 26 points per game. And that is just – you're not going to win football games that way. That's all that needs to be said there. Mark Sanchez has taken over a team with a prolific offense. He has plenty of playmakers around him. He can screw up and make a couple of mistakes like he did last week and still win the game. And that's what I like about him. And I also think that he's a decent fantasy play, a top 12 option, just given who's out there this week. So if you need the help, he is certainly a player you can pick up and play for this week. You got to like LaShawn McCoy in a very favorable matchup, Jeremy Maclin in a very favorable matchup, Zach Ertz as usual. Consider the Eagles DST and give them a start. The Panthers have had problems on offense. And it's not to say that they will have all of them this week, but they have. So, it's one of those things that certainly goes in your favor if you've got the Eagles defense, and it's a thin week for defenses, so give them a go. I like Cam Newton this week. I think he's a top 12 guy. He's going against a team giving up 3rd most fantasy points to the position. You can get him active. Kelvin Benjamin, stick with him. I know what happened last week with him and Newton, but let's put it behind us. He is still a deeply talented player that should get some better play from Cam Newton and make some plays. Greg Olsen is a weekly must start. And I think you got to consider D'Angelo Williams as a low RB2 flex play, just given the running backs that are out there that are going to be available. But in the end, in the city of brotherly love, Eagles win.
All right, so there you have it, folks. The Week 10 matchups, play-by-play. If you're listening to this on demand and have any questions about who to start, who to sit, head over to thefantasygreek.com. That's thefantasygreek.com. Sign yourself up for the Skybox if you haven't yet and get all of the in-depth analysis that Jim can spew out of his brain. We have about 4.5 minutes left, and this is a time of the program where we tend to look at my fantasy team, and I try to solicit Jim for some free advice. My lineup is pretty much setting itself this week, though, due to bye weeks. So I'm just going to throw some oddball questions out at you.
Okay.
The big question that I have here is that I'm beginning to get a glut of receivers. So I'm going to ask you which ones I should trade. Okay. Next week, I have Josh Gordon stashed away on my injured reserve. Okay. So my receivers and tight ends are Josh Gordon, Odell Beckham, Keenan Allen, Brandon Cooks, Julius Thomas, and Michael Crabtree. Now, with the trade deadline rapidly approaching, which one of those guys should I be looking to offload?
I think you've got to consider Brandon Cooks, and here's why. Every other player you have mentioned, with the exception of Keenan Allen, I think has been steady producers this season. You should be happy with them from here until the end of the season. Problem with Brandon Cooks is he's on a team, and while heavily targeted, he's on a team where the production's being split up. One week he could have a big role, another week Marcus Colston could have a big role. Kenny Stills is eating into targets and receptions as to Brandon Cooks and Marcus Colston. And then obviously you have Jimmy Graham, who's really the lead go-getter for the Saints. And I think if Brandon Cooks has a big game this week, which he could, it would be the perfect time, to trade him while his value is high. Things could change. I mean, his role could grow. But to me, I think you've just got too many people eating from the same table in New Orleans, where the other players you've mentioned, they could all sort of produce on their own. Keenan Allen would be another guy that you could also trade, but he's only had one really good game this season.
Right.
Even if he gets another one this week or next week, I don't know that that'd be enough to sort of save his value.
Keep waiting for the cork to pop on his season.
Yeah, me too.
It's week 10, so you know what I mean. I'm starting to get impatient. So I did propose a trade. Now you and I are in a league, and I run my own league. So obviously, being the commissioner, people ask me questions, and through a text conversation, I got the feeling that one of my inexperienced owners was trying to drop Calvin Johnson. Now, obviously, he's on the do not drop list, so that's not possible. So I proposed a trade, obviously, so if he's trying to offload him. So I offered him Michael Crabtree, Brandon Cooks, and Trey Mason for Calvin Johnson. Did I overreach?
No, I just don't think that I wouldn't take that trade, because Calvin Johnson by himself is one terrific player, and he will outproduce the three guys that you mentioned potentially. And I would even turn down the trade if you offer that to me. I'm keeping Calvin Johnson. Now, I suppose that assumes that my team is still pretty good without him, because I have him in a couple teams, and one league not doing so well, the other one I'm just fine. So that might be a factor in the decision, but I would just say that you just don't have the right mix of players for him.
Right. Well, I'm trying to prey on the inexperienced. To be quite honest, I'm not proud of it. It just it is what it is at this point.
It is what it is. Yeah, sure.
And with that, folks, we are out of time on another session of the Starts and Sits in 60 Minutes. For Jim Saranteas, the Fantasy Greek, follow him on Twitter at the Fantasy Greek from thefantasygreek.com. I'm Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Check out Bob Sullivan Show 2.0, and then we are off for the weekend and back on Sunday night with the Sunday Bob Sullivan Show. Have a good week, folks, and enjoy the games.